What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have 7 tips for you to help you improve the quality of video that you get from your DJI drone. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. My name's Denim. I share videos about drones, different tech and creative projects that I'm working on. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let's get into tip number 1. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your drone meets all the safety requirements from your perspective each time you fly. Some are physical checks to make sure that you don't have damage to your propellers and any physical damage to the body of the drone. That's really important. Like any aircraft, once it's up in the air, any little compromise to either any part of the body of that drone will cause the drone to lose balance and fall out of the sky. It's that simple. So you want to make sure that before you go out flying, you take your drone out, you unpack it, you check the propellers for any damage, and you make sure that everything seems physically okay and passes the eye test, really, because there's not much else you can do from a mechanical side with these drones. So that's the first important step. The other thing that you can do from a safety perspective is go into the DJI Fly app and make sure that your max altitude and your return to home altitude is effectively set. The more important one is probably the max altitude, and here in Australia it's 120 meters, which is legal to fly your drone, and anything above that is actually illegal. Now, from country to country that may change, so you'll need to have a little understanding of how that works in your region or your country that you're planning to fly your drone in. Make sure that in your DJI Fly app you go into the safety settings and update the maximum altitude. I think this is probably one of the more important safety measures that you've got to take before flying your drone. And if you've applied sort of firmware updates, done any application updates to the DJI Fly app, then it's still worth going in and checking this before you fly on a regular basis. Tip number 2 is to aim for variety in your videos. This has helped me so much in terms of creating more engaging videos to share, not only on my YouTube channel, but for potential clients that I'm trying to work with on the side, to make some money with my drone. Now, if you're interested in making money with your drone, let me know in the comments, because this is an area that I'm thinking about talking about a little bit more. But it's important when it comes to creating professional video from your drone that you have variety from the different angles, perspectives, and also the speeds and altitudes that your drone travels at while you're actually capturing video. It's really boring when you've got drone video that sits in the same altitude and at the same speed. You generally, if you were like me, you'll probably watch the first few seconds, maybe the first 30 seconds, and you'll click off and you'll keep moving ahead because it's just not as engaging as some of the other videos that are out there. There are some amazing videos where the drone sits at one altitude, and if you've got an amazing view or landscape, this can work effectively. But if you don't and you're trying to be creative, then variety is your best friend, and make sure that you plan for drone shots with different speeds, altitudes, fly in different modes on your actual drone. This will help add variety without having to do or change too much. Before you go and fly, that you have an idea of maybe 5 or 7 drone moves that you can actually go to that will get you those results. This is really important and it works really well for me. Try this tip out if you're looking for more variety or trying to create more engaging pieces of video. Tip number 3 is to vary the speeds that you travel at with your drone. You don't want to be just traveling in sports mode, and you don't want to just be traveling in cine mode or normal mode for the entirety of your video. Variety is your best friend when it comes to creating engaging pieces of video that people will be interested in. You want to make sure that you have something that is nice to look at and it's not boring, as I mentioned to you before. So use speed as a way to create variety. I do this in a couple of different ways. Not only by changing the altitude, but moving closer to the ground attenuates speed. I've kind of mentioned this in previous videos, but it's something that I'm using a little bit more often now because the effect of the ground moving underneath the camera on the drone is really, really cool, and it looks awesome on any kind of video. So try to use speed, changes of speed, but that doesn't mean changing directions of your drone and how it's flying from point A to point B. You don't want to be sort of changing direction really quickly, because with the DJI Mini 2, for example, it's not a FPV drone. and you know, it gets up to 36 miles per hour or about 55 kilometers an hour, which is amazing for a drone this size that can shoot in 4K. What you want to try to do is change the speed from sort of clip to clip, or if it's from shot to shot, if that makes sense. Try that out. I think variety again is really, really important, and speed is one way that you can control and add and take away from your video. Tip number 4 is a bit of a don't, and something that I always talk to with new beginner drone pilots, friends, family, or others. I generally like to tell them to minimize the amount of gimbal moves that they actually use within their videos. The reason being is because gimbal moves take a lot of practice, and if you're an adequate or a intermediate or a pro flyer, this may not apply to you. But what's really important is gimbal moves, if you move it too quickly or you pan too quickly up or down, it just ruins your video. So what I like to do is have some kind of understanding of my subject or the location that I'm filming at, and try to set up my gimbal before my drone gets into motion. By doing this, I'm giving the best chance for myself to actually focus on flying the drone, capturing that piece of video, and moving on to the next shot, rather than having too many complicated moves that are going to means that I have to go back and maybe film 5-10 different clips to make sure that I get the right one. Now, you may have some moves in your video plan for the day that says you need to use a pan or different gimbal moves to go along with the drone, and that's fine. But if you look at a lot of the drone pilots and a lot of the professional videos out there, they don't have too much movement in the actual gimbal itself. A lot of it, the gimbal gets set up at the start, and it's actually the drone that moves from point A to point B, whether that is a pan from side to side, or if it's a push forward, a pull back. The gimbal doesn't move too much. The only times that this would sort of change a little bit is if you have a tracking shot and your subject is underneath the drone and it might be moving around a little bit. Then you may need to be quite good at using the gimbal and sort of tracking and moving to make sure that your subject stays in the middle. But what I've found really effective again is setting up my gimbal and then choosing the move that I'm going to make and then pushing forward with that move. Tip number 5 is something that I recommend for every drone pilot, whether you're a hobbyist or working on a project for a client. What you want to do is hold your shots for a minimum of 10 to 15 seconds. This will help you avoid having to refilm the same boring bit of video over and over again, and then going back in the editing process looking for that good one. What you want to try to do is obviously film a couple of different variations of the move that you're trying to capture and the piece of video that you're trying to get, but hold your shot for 10 to 15 seconds. That's just going to make it so much easier in the post-production process as well as the editing process. And not only that, you're going to not chew up too much time, battery time of your drone or SD card space when you're out and about. Those things are crucial, and you want to be effective as you can with the battery life that you've got on your drone. So try to hold your shots for 10 to 15 seconds. And what I like to do is, if I have 5 drone moves for the day around a subject or to highlight a subject, I'll try to aim to get that same shot 3 times at 10 to 15 second clips. And that gives me a good chance to capture exactly what I want. And so when I go back home, I'm less likely going to be disappointed with the video that I've captured. The next tip is to make sure that you turn on and use the different guides that DJI has on all these different drones. When you're flying your drone, the last thing you want to have to worry about is my subject centered in the frame, or is my image or video too overexposed? And the best ways to try to help you achieve those things without too much stress is to set up a histogram. Also the grids guide, which is in the settings of your camera inside the DJI Fly app. And once you do this, the histogram is very useful for telling you and indicating overexposure in your image. So that takes care of having to actually take the drone down, re-watch footage, only to realize that you've got to go back up and then take that shot again. So what I like to do now is start the histogram up, put it to the corner of my screen, and then I'm always looking for overexposure in my image. Now what you're looking for with the histogram is you'll see a bunch of different lines. What you're really aiming for is those lines to be bunched up somewhere in the middle or close to the middle as possible. That's more of a balanced image and a more balanced shot, and that's just going to give you the best results. The other guide that I like to use is the grids guide. Again, a really simple setup in the camera settings within the DJI Fly app. And what this does is it makes sure that your subject and the landscape is symmetrical, or your subject is always in the middle of your screen. So let's say, for example, you're following a car down a highway or a road. What you want to make sure is that that car is somewhere in the middle of your screen for the entirety of that shot. You don't want the car moving off center too much, and what the grids will help you do is determine how much faster you need to move your drone or how much slower you need to move it to make sure that the camera is keeping that subject central and in the focus for the entirety of that video. The next tip is to set your exposure correctly for the location and lighting that you're actually filming in. What I like to normally do is set my exposure value to about -0.7. Now I do this on a really bright day, and I generally will fly with an ND16 or ND32. If you're interested in looking at some of those ND filters for your drone, your DJI Mini 2, Mini 3 or Mini 3 Pro, I'll leave some links for you in the description. But when I do have these ND filters on, it naturally does reduce the amount of light that gets into my lens, giving that cinematic look to it. Now, what I don't want to do is make my image too dark, but at the same time, I find that -0.7 on a really, really bright day with an ND16 and sometimes an ND32 works really well for me. It's just about finding balance for the shot that you want to get, and it will take some trial and error. -0.3 can also work. It just depends on the time of the day that you're going to be flying in. So make sure that you spend the time to calibrate or check the exposure value and to make sure that you're actually happy with the quality of video that's coming back through your remote control. Those are the 7 tips I had for you today. A bit of trial and error will be involved with some of them to kind of calibrate what you're looking for on the day. And I've created a cheat sheet for everyone. I'll link that for you in the description below. This drone video guide can be printed off, or you can carry it on your mobile phone as a PDF. It's just a helpful reminder and a really helpful resource to make sure that you are checking all the boxes before you fly your drone and ensuring that you are able to consistently capture the types of video that you want. Again, if you're interested, the links are in the description below. I hope you got some value out of today's video. If you did, the one way to let me know is by hitting that like button. Leave any questions for me in the comments section, and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.